Hi all, welcome back. It's been a long time since I made a video and you'll soon discover why. As you probably already know, I live out here in Morocco, beautiful part of the world, lovely people and a lovely country. However, I ran into a bit of a problem. I, in my ignorance, didn't realise that I was only allowed to drive for a period of time here in Morocco on a British driving licence. And it appears that once you obtain residency, you actually have to apply for a Moroccan driving licence, or if you're one of those lucky countries, which England is not, you can actually exchange your driving licence for a Moroccan driving licence. So I ran up into a bit of a problem, realising that I wasn't caught, I wasn't warned or anything like that, but I read online that that was the case. So I double checked, and it was the case. Now, I'm in my 60s and I really didn't fancy taking a driving test at my time of the life, especially since I passed my driving test back in UK in the 80s. I won't exactly tell you when, but it definitely was the early 80s. So there I was with this dilemma. What do I do? Now, of course I love driving. I wanted to continue driving, and of course I wanted to continue driving legally. So I then had to bite the bullet and realise there was no way around this except to do a Moroccan driving test. Sounds easy in theory. I would like to say at this point, this is not a criticism at the system. It's just my own personal experience that I found when I had to do a Moroccan driving test. So I had to do a Moroccan driving test, and I'm going to run you through my experience of the processes that I had to go through. So, first discovered, as I say, that I wasn't able to drive. So I went down to my local driving school, and this is where the fun begins. Now, perhaps in major cities throughout Morocco, there may be driving schools that have very good English-speaking teachers. But mostly in the areas that I've been to, especially in the rural towns or the smaller towns, they don't speak English. You might be lucky enough to find a few of them that speak French, because as you probably know, that French is the most common language after Moroccan here. I don't speak French, so that posed a bit of a problem. And my Jarija, which is a Moroccan Arabic dialect, is pretty poor too. So I went into the driving school. You have to register, of course. You have to submit bits and pieces of paperwork to show where you're living and your residency, etc. And that's where the fun begins, because once you receive your residency, that is the green light, as to say, or in this case, the red light that you have to stop driving. As a tourist, you are permitted to drive, from my understanding, you're allowed to drive up to a maximum of about 12 months. But the moment you apply for residency, and that's been granted, as a resident, your license, your driving license, or even in some cases your international driving license, which in England you can obtain from a post office, is no longer truly valid. So you can't obviously lie if you are stopped by the police. You can't say, oh no, I'm a tourist. They could check and find out that you actually are a resident. And that's not a good way to be, is it? To be deceitful. You have to be quite honest and straightforward. So going back into my driving school, went into this building and was presented by some quite archaic computers. And as I say, I registered myself. And then I went in, to my surprise, I was asked, do you want it in Darija or French? And I said, oh, well, I don't speak Darija or French. I was sort of sent away with some apps on my phone, because I couldn't really attend the school as frequently as I'd like, because I live in the countryside. So I went home and opened these apps, and to my horror, yeah, they were in Moroccan dialect, not pure Arabic, not the Fusha Arabic that is used throughout the media. And understandably why, because obviously a lot of people here can only speak Darija or local Moroccan dialect. But that posed a problem, because actually what I wanted to use was a translational app. I tried using the app. So what I would do is download the app on my phone. I'd go on my computer, I'd found this website that I needed to use, But my app that I was using to translate with was having a hissy fit. It wasn't able to do it. It couldn't translate them. So it was absolutely hysterical at times, because sometimes it would listen to a particular question for the driving test, and you'd have 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 2 options, and it would translate it the way it thought it should be translated, and when it was hysterical. I mean, I even had one point there where it said, "Your car is a tart." I thought, okay, right, fair enough. It just couldn't cope with the different dialect. So I quickly thought, well, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give that a miss, because obviously not only are we talking about Darija as a dialect, but it's written as an Arabic script. Well, I can't really read Arabic script, not very well anyway. So I thought, what do I do? Panic set in, I can't drive, what do? I need to drive. Let's have a look at the French. Yeah, that's a good option. Let's do the French. So I went back to the driving school, enthusiastic, because I thought, well, at least my app will be able to translate the French, sort of. I go back to driving school only to find out that there should be 40 modules that you need to learn, but they were only really able to supply about 28. So you were lacking 11. If you researched online thoroughly with YouTube, you were able to find the so-called missing 11, although hit and miss whether they're exactly the ones that were missing. So I researched in French, thinking this is all going to be fine. I researched for about 3 months using the app painstakingly, knowing or noticing that a lot of the questions in the driving school were quite outdated, especially when looking back to the driving test in the UK. I thought, okay, well, you know, I'm here in Morocco, do as the Moroccans do, you're not in England, forget the English highway code, focus on what the Moroccan system's telling you. So that's what I did. I then applied for my driving test, which again is quite nerve-wracking, because you're given 40 questions and you have to get a minimum of 32 correct. So it's quite chaotic that morning. You're given categories of groups to go in. You don't really quite know what's going on, because obviously a lot of people around you speaking in Moroccan and things are happening. But I quickly realised that I needed an interpreter. And my wife, who speaks perfect English, is not able to do that because she's not government registered. So I panicked. What am I going to do? I need a translator, I need an interpreter who's government registered. And I found a lovely chap called Ashraf. I will be giving more of his details later on in the next video. A lovely chap who goes above and beyond what he's supposed to do. So we didn't have an awful lot of opportunities before my test, but we linked up a couple of times. He liked to use the vocabulary that I use, because of course in England we call things differently in terms of cars than perhaps our American friends do, like the bonnet of a car, you know, as Americans call it a hood, or the boot is known as a trunk, and you're going to park near the path, which they call a sidewalk. So, you know, dipped beams and all those types of different words that are different in American compared to English. And a lot of the Moroccans, when they do study English, they learn from American teachers, or they watch a lot of American films, so they tend to pick up the American words. So he wanted to know which words I would use in order not to confuse me, which is not difficult at my age. But he was really helpful. I must say he was excellent. So we got familiarised with the words. I gave him certain questions that I couldn't quite understand with my translator app. And we thought that we were somewhat prepared for the exam. So him and I, on the day of the exam, along with my wife, we go to the examinational room. She, of course, has to wait outside. And you're given not a cubicle as such, a row of computers, just got a dividing panel. And you sit in, not quite sure what's of course, you know, you're in there for an exam, but how it's actually going to pan out, you're not told. So the gentleman or the lady there, in my case it was a gentleman, walks up, types in a code, says to you what language, you say French, and they press the button and off you go, and it starts asking you questions. Now, why it was incredibly difficult, because my translator, he had to have the headphones that I should be wearing. So I couldn't hear the question, which to me, I sort of over the months familiarised myself with certain French terminology, like with the lights and stuff like that, and certain things, certain questions, but more I think I'd memorised the questions than anything else. Now, there are an awful lot to memorise because, as I say, there are 40 modules and there are about 20 to 40 questions in each module. So you do the maths, that's an awful lot of questions that could be potentially asked. So here he is sitting there with his headphones on, me looking at the question, trying my best to read the question, and him at the same time translating the question. Now do bear in mind, you have a timer. So in 2 counts, you have to wait for the questions to be asked, for a green light to come on if you want to select your option, which could be 1, 2, 3 or 4, or it could be multiple. It could be 1, 2 and 3. It could be even 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you can't select your answer until the question has been asked. So that's very important, because if you try to rush it, you might think that you've answered and pressed the button, but it hasn't registered. So you have to wait until this little green light tells you, select your answer. Now, of course you're nervous. Anyone would be. Now, if you're not quite sure of the first question, because sometimes the questions are similar, and you ask the translator, bless him, he's not able to read it. He's not allowed to look at your screen. He merely has a set of headphones and he has sat behind a screen. So he can't peep around, see which one, and you point, oh, it's this. So he has to try as best as he can to memorize them in order and then to translate them over to you. So if you happen to forget one of them, you got a problem. So it's a one-hit opportunity. And unfortunately, I panicked. I didn't quite understand the system. I didn't realise that sometimes I had to wait for this validation green light to come on. And unfortunately, I got 28 out of a possible 40. Now, I had told myself, if I fail, I'm not going to do it again. Which was really sad, because, as I say, I've been driving since the 80s. I love cars. What am I going to do? I live in the countryside. My wife has just started driving. What am I going to do? I'm going to be pretty isolated. But it's not cheap. And having an interpreter, he's worth his weight in gold. It's still quite costly. So I thought, what am I going to do? I came out really disheartened, but found out that I have a second attempt for free. Now, it's about 2,500 dirham, which is about £200. And for the work he does and the effort that he does, it's well worth it. But if I had to pay again, then it's really going to start pushing up the price. So I was pleasantly surprised to know that I have a free retest in 15 days. So in other words, I really couldn't tell you that. I couldn't say no. So I came home really disgruntled, really upset. But I suppose a little bit better for the experience that I'd just been through, and a little bit more aware of what perhaps I needed to do. So, to join me again for part 2 of my second attempt. Take care.